One of my greatest abilities might not seem like an ability at all, and that is I tend not to be an overthinker. Now, overthinking occurs when people like ruminate. And if you're listening to this, you might be one of those people that's like, I have a hard time sleeping because I cannot turn my brain off, or just people who overthink, just constantly stay in a cycle of thinking. And I have a tendency not to do that. I think overthinking gets in your way. It stops you from progress. It stops you from taking action towards things that you really want to do and or achieve. Like, overthinking is the enemy of success. And I've been thinking a lot about this, which why we're going to cover it this week on our podcast. But I was also thinking, like, where does it come from and what do we do about it? I think I've got some answers to this. Like, I know what overthinking is connected to. I know what keeps it alive. And I also think I have some ideas on how we can overcome it. So that's what we're going to talk about this week. So welcome back to the aha moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. Of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie, and I want to tell you a really quick story about overthinking. So just remember me saying this. If you want to achieve anything, if you want to become a millionaire, if you want to lose weight, if you want to get a degree, you want to get a promotion, you want to be a better person, doesn't matter what it is, action trumps all. Like, you have to take action. And I want to tell you what I'm like, just how powerful overthinking can be. And maybe I'll tell you two stories about this, actually, because there are two things in my head. So the first one is, in the very, very beginning of my career, I worked at an agency in community mental health. And I partnered with a good friend of mine named Blaine. And we kind of started our speaking careers together. And we had these like big ambitions for our careers. Like, we wanted to open a clinic, i.e. therapy practice together. We wanted to give more talks around the world. We wanted to write books. Like, we had all these ideas on the different ways we wanted to get our messages out into our field. We were young and kind of up and coming in the field. And I didn't know how to write a book. And I definitely didn't know how to convince a publisher to publish the book that I wrote. So I talked to a colleague of mine, and they suggested that I go and buy a book called How to Write a Book Proposal, something like that. So I go read it. The book costs, I don't know, like $30. Now, Blaine was like, I don't think I want to get that book. I found a cheaper book, similar topic. And I was like, cool. So within a couple of weeks, I had read the book, and I'm like writing my book proposal, and I'm off sending it to publishers. And Blaine, an overthinker, is just like reading it. He's like, I want to get it perfect. And Blaine, to this day, has never written a book, and I've written 6. I've traveled around the world as one of the most hired speakers in our industry. Blaine still works at the same agency that we worked at where we were having those conversations. Now, it's important to go like get information, but you can't overthink about it. Another thing that stands out to me about this is in my field, and around like 2017 or so, there was a large platform. I won't say the name because I don't mean to throw this person on the bus, and I'm saying this with no judgment at all. But there was this large platform where tens of thousands of therapists would engage in this Facebook group and then listen to this guy's podcast. And then COVID happened, and like everyone went online, and that was a massive opportunity for people to launch products, podcasts, books, businesses, all kinds of stuff. And this guy was primed for this. But as a self-proclaimed overthinker, he made a Facebook post where he said, I'm stepping away from my therapy practice, a little bit of a psychotherapist, and I'm going to do a year's worth of research so I can really launch this thing that I'm doing. And I was like, a year is too long. Like, you got to catch the wave while it's happening. So he doesn't really do a whole lot in that year. And I'm sure in the background he was working and researching and digging. But fast forward to a few years later, and he's had to go back into his therapy practice. He often boasts, like, since 2015, my company has done over $300,000. Well, I do that in I do that in 2 months because action trumps all. So you've got to make sure that you are not allowing your overthinking to get in the way of your progress. Now, I started this by saying, I'm going to tell you where it comes from. It comes from our school experiences convincing us being perfect. Like, we don't turn in a paper till we think it's going to be an A. We don't turn in an assignment and know they're going to get a high score. And most people live their lives that way. Like I'm not willing to share it with the world until I know it's going to be perfect. And that causes you to overthink and overthink and overthink until you ultimately don't take any action. So if you're listening to this, and by the way, most people identify as overthinkers. So if you're listening to this, I want you to think about, what am I overthinking about? And how could I just start taking action so I could achieve something I dream about? This past weekend, I was watching a documentary, probably have seen it 10,000 times. It's called The Last Dance, and it's about the 1996 Chicago Bulls championship season. It's a really cool documentary. I grew up a Bulls fan. I grew up a Michael Jordan fan. So it's really cool to go back 20 years and kind of relive those experiences with those amazing Bulls teams. 30 years, I guess, actually. Wow. And there was a scene in it where someone described Michael Jordan as a mystic. He was like the separator between Michael Jordan and everybody else. It wasn't that he could run faster or jump higher or he was better skilled at basketball. The separator was, in this exact phrase, Jordan was a mystic. And then he went on to say, he never let anything he couldn't control into his head. And thinking about this topic, how we're going to be talking about this whole idea of overthinking, how do you know when you overthink and what to do about it? I thought, no wonder Michael Jordan is so incredibly successful, because he was not an overthinker. And remember what I said in a previous podcast episode, action trumps all. Like really being someone that takes action on a project, it trumps everything, right? All you have to do is take action. Action trumps all. And here we have Michael Jordan, the greatest basketball player, arguably the greatest basketball player of all time. No argument for me. I actually think it's pretty convincing. Who he just wasn't an overthinker. Like he never let his brain focus on anything he couldn't control. Well, today I want to help you guys to understand, what are you doing that stops you from being that way? Like, to simplify a process is to make that process more successful. So what are you doing to get in your way? And how do you know when you're overthinking? I'm going to give you 5 signs. I give you a clue that you are overthinking. I think the very first sign that lets you know that you are an overthinker is when you find yourself thinking about details that you cannot control. So right now it just happens to be raining right outside that window there. And if I decided I'm going to run today, like I have to decide I'm going to run today. I remember I had a client that he was a very passionate motorcycle rider, and he rode his motorcycles every single day, and he would go on these super long rides every weekend. And he would describe it like, it's good for my mental health. I like being out on the open road. Like this is just what I like to do. And me, not being a motorcycle rider, I said, you do this every weekend? And he goes, yeah. And I said, what do you do if it rains? And he looked at me as if I had just asked him the dumbest question in the world. And he said, I get wet. And then I remember feeling like I just asked him the dumbest question in the world, because the answer to his question was so straightforward and so obvious. But that's how you know that he is not overthinking. That's like, whether or not it's raining or not is not a variable that he can control. He has decided, I'm going to be a kind of guy who rides my motorcycle daily, and I'm going to go on long rides every weekend, period. Like, that's the decision I'm making. I'm not going to worry about whether it's raining or not, because I'm going to do this. Another sign is if you spend more time planning and you find yourself, you spend so much time planning that you end up never taking action on the thing, and then you end up with like a bunch of half-done projects. I think another sign that you are someone that overthinks is when you have a hard time like relaxing and calming your brain, because you're thinking about all the details of things that you want to do but are not ready yet to do. I think another thing that gives you a clue that you are an overthinker is if you fear judgment. Oftentimes overthinking comes from fear. Like, I'm afraid if I like send out this video, people will think it's not super high quality. I'm not going to get good comments about it, blah, blah, blah. But remember, action trumps all. So you have to be able to release things when they're, 60% the quality you want them to do, because you're going to get better feedback from your audience that way. Instead, sometimes people, they hold back, like they don't share things that they want to share. And I think the 5th thing I will say that's associated with overthinking is if you find yourself not measuring progress towards the accomplishment of a goal, it's usually because you're overthinking and not taking enough action to move towards that goal. So ask yourself about those 5 details and see if you are an overthinker. As I was getting ready to do this podcast, somebody asked me, I was talking to somebody about like, hey, we're going to be covering, overthinking and the impacts of overthinking in people's lives. And somebody asked me like, hey man, you don't seem like an overthinker. You're very much a doer. Have you ever been an overthinker? Like, is overthinking something you've ever done as a part of your life? And it caused me to think, like, I thought back to like when I was a kid, I thought back to, the different stages of my life, both the good and the bad, and was really, really thinking, like, is that something I've ever really associated with? Like, have I ever really considered myself an overthinker? Have I ever thought about, is that kind of what I align with? And the truth is, no, I've never really identified or kind of felt resonant with overthinking. It's just not part of my makeup. Not 100% sure why. And like, as I said in a previous podcast episode about this, I think overthinking partly has its roots in trying to please our teachers and get good grades in school. And as a consequence, I wasn't really a great student early on in my education life. Obviously, I've gotten several degrees, so obviously I sorted that out. But when I was a kid, I didn't really get good grades, in part because I didn't struggle with trying to be perfect. It wasn't something that was important to me for one reason or another. And there were negative consequences of that too. Like, I thought I wasn't smart because everybody else is like showing up to do a great job. And they want their teachers to love them and their work. And I did not have that. Again, good or bad, I just didn't have it. So I want to talk about the consequences of overthinking and not today, because I think they're important. So overthinking, and by the way, I should say this, like, I don't really have a good word for the opposite of overthinking. I suppose in literal terms, the opposite of overthinking is underthinking. But that seems to have a negative connotation associated with it, so I'm not going to use that as the phrase. But just the opposite, overthinking and the opposite of overthinking. I don't want to make it sound like I think people who do one or the other are better. There are definitely strengths and weaknesses to both, just like anything else. For me, I wasn't a great student, like I said, in early education, and that really affected me. Now, I thought it was because I wasn't as intelligent, but I can remember, now I'm going to date myself a bit, but these days every assignment is handed in electronically. But back when I was a kid, if you wrote a paper, you had to write the paper, type it, print it, and then you put it in these sleeves, these clear plastic sleeves that had this binder thing on the end. And I can remember some kids would come to school and they had the clear plastic sleeve was a blue hue, and the binder thing on the plastic binder thing on the end was blue, and everything was perfect. And I literally was like, I don't care about that. And I would just staple my paper together and turn it in. And I knew this is probably affecting my grade, but I just don't care to do that. But when you do that all the time, you see those people and you think that's how people should conduct themselves. And I ended up judging myself negatively because I just didn't care to be that way. It just wasn't important to me. That's the only way I can describe it. Just wasn't important to me. Now, the positive part of this, and I didn't learn this until later in life, but now I'm Facebook friends with all these people, and they've done fine in life. They, got good jobs, and they work a good 9-to-5 job, and they have a kind of a regimented, ritualistic life. And my life, I was able to become an entrepreneur and take risks, and some of those risks massively paid off. And I'm living a lived experience that is different from them. And now they'll reach out to me and say, I can't believe the way your life looks. I can't believe that you get to do the things that you get to do. And I know part of it is attached to the fact that I don't overthink things. When you overthink, you tend to take less risks. And I'm not just talking about bungee jumping or gambling. I'm talking about for fear of judgment, you just don't take any action. You don't take any risks. And you try to stay as normative as possible. That's just never been a part of my DNA. I don't worry about people judging me. I don't worry about people seeing my flaws. I don't worry about people seeing me fail. I think it's just part of who I am as a person, but a massive contributor to how I've gotten to where I've gotten to. So I think it's important that we realize, if you are an overthinker, it doesn't make you better than the people who aren't, because as a young kid, your grades were better. But if you're not an overthinker, it doesn't make you better than people. You just have different aims and different goals. What I do think is important is that you understand what your strengths are and accept yourself. I wish I had done that way sooner. But it was later in life that I realized, like, oh, this thing that I do that allows me to take action faster than most, and the thing that I do that allows me to handle more risk, that's actually a strength and helps me to get into scenarios that I otherwise wouldn't be able to get into. So just think about that. I am surrounded by overthinkers. Some of the closest people to me would identify as being overthinkers. And it's kind of hilarious because I'm the exact opposite of an overthinker. It's just not part of my makeup. It's not part of what I do. It's not how I live my life. But it just seems like everyone around me is that kind of person that just super overthinks. And I've been paying attention to them, and I love them. They're amazing people. And as I've been trying to say all week, overthinking, I think it gets in the way of the way people try to achieve and live a happy life. But I don't think there's anything wrong with those people. I don't think there's like they're living life somehow worse than someone else who doesn't overthink is living life. And I don't identify it as a problem. But just like how sometimes not thinking through things enough has gotten me into certain troubles, and I could use to slow down and overthink, which is why I'm actually glad to be surrounded by overthinkers. Overthinking to an extreme can get into an issue as well. Like, so neither one is perfect, which is why I think this topic that we're covering this week is relevant, because a lot of overthinkers tend to let it get in the way. Like some people overthink so much that they literally don't get a whole lot done. So what do we do about that? What do we do when we find ourselves overthinking to the point where it's hindering our ability to get stuff done? And I'm not just talking about like build a business or lose weight or accomplish a big goal or get a degree or anything. I'm literally talking about like household chores, doing like getting through the day. Well, today I'm going to talk about 3 strategies that will help you stop overthinking so that you could literally just slow down and get things done. So the first suggestion that I have, and it is going to sound wild coming from me, because all the people who know me really well know that I would never do this. Like, this thing is just not a part of my life. Again, why not? Because I know I don't tend to be an overthinker. So we have to think, so I have to pay attention to what the overthinkers around me are doing. And I'm telling you, they would laugh if they heard me say what I'm about to say. But the first strategy I want to say is how important it is to make lists. When you are an overthinker, your brain is just like working on overdrive to make sure you're not missing any details. For example, if you've got a day where you've got to like run a bunch of errands, you got to do laundry, you've got to like clean the house, you've got to like schedule doctor's appointments, your brain is like, all right, I got to make sure I don't miss anything. And then you start worrying about, oh, if I do that and I forget that, and you literally, like, I know people that will be like, I don't remember what I need to get at the store, so I guess I need to do this. And before you know it, it's like 4 p.m. They don't even have time to run the errands anymore. So what do? Is we make lists. So we don't have to worry about missing details. We have the list there right in front of us that allows us to keep track of the things that we need to do. So that's first and foremost. Become someone that makes lists and keep things organized in that way. All of the overthinkers that are able to manage it, that in my life, they're all list takers. The second thing I want you to do is every single day is pause, relax, and do a hobby activity. And that allows your brain to like disconnect. And a hobby activity is something that's defined as something you experience as fun. It has a definitive start time, a definitive end time, and no responsibilities before or after. So pick something like playing a video game or playing a board game or something like that. Literally once a day for like 20 minutes. It doesn't have to be crazy, but just give your brain the opportunity to slow down and take a pause and not be thinking about anything during that hobby activity. The third thing, and this is going to sound really simple, but it's actually the most important, is just get started. Paralysis becomes the thing that fuels overthinking. And the more you just sit around ruminating and overthinking about issues and problems and things going on in your life, the worse it gets. So like, just get started. Just like start doing the chores, just start doing the work, just start doing the project. Like literally just get started. And then you learn the most valuable lesson in the world, which is if I go to the grocery store and I happen to forget something, I'll just go back to the grocery store and it's not that big of a deal. A lot of overthinking is rooted in our desire to be perfect and not make any mistakes. And we need to lose that and realize like, so what? If I go to the store and I forget something, I'll just go back or I'll just Uber Eats it and have it delivered to my house. I don't have to over worry about being perfect. I can just be a person. So just get started, and then you're going to learn the most valuable lesson in the world. You are not perfect. You do not have to be, and everything will be just fine. As I mentioned before, I am not an overthinker. In fact, I would identify as the exact opposite. But to be very honest with you, there are definitely times where I wish I had thought something through more thoroughly, where I wish I had taken my time to be more prepared for a moment or an event or an experience, right? Whatever that thing was. And I don't really know. Somebody asked me, how can you tell the difference between something you can take action on and something that, you need to be more thoughtful about? And the truth is, I don't know. I don't know how to tell the difference. But I do know how to make sure that when those events come up where I need to be more thoughtful, that I'm able to do so. I don't know how to tell the difference, but through lived experience, through luck, acts of God, I have landed in a place where I know how to navigate those things. And I'm going to talk about that today because it's been one of the most valuable lessons in my life. And I literally attribute this thing to one of the biggest reasons I've been able to achieve some success and accomplish some milestones in my life. The secret isn't about knowing how to tell the difference between something where you need to be more thoughtful and something where you need to just take action. The secret is actually accepting where you fall on that category, if you will, where you fall on that rubric, or I don't know what the word is, I can't find it, but anyway, continuum, there you go. Where you fall on that continuum. Are you more of an action taker or more of an overthinker? Accepting where you are and understanding that there's nothing wrong with it, but here's the key. Surrounding yourself with people who care about you and want you to succeed, and then understanding that they're going to help you slow down or take action. And I'll give you an example. I am very much an action taker. And like I said, I'm thankful for that. I'm grateful for that. It's got me in some wonderful situations, but it's also caused me some strife because I'm likely to just jump off the ledge before I realize oh crap, I probably should have wondered a little bit more about before I made that decision or took that action. And my good buddy Adam, and we do a lot of work together. He's a much more thoughtful person, much more deliberate person, much more thorough person in that way. I'm not sure I would call him an overthinker, but he's certainly more on the overthinking side than I am. And if I propose an idea to him, hey Adam, let's set up a training and go and do this and go and do that, I know that Adam is going to ask me 1,000 questions about that training. I know that Adam is going to ask me a million things about how do we do this and how do we do that, and how do you know it's the right time? Would it be better to do it in April versus November, or would it be better to do it next year? I know Adam is going to ask all of those questions. So if I really like the idea, before I even bring it to him, it makes me think about, almost anticipate what questions he's going to ask me and then get ready to answer them because I really like the idea and I want him to be on board. So having someone like him around me has forced me to slow down because I know I'm going to get questions if he's going to participate. Now, Adam doesn't always have to participate. If I just went to him hey, Adam, I'm going to Zimbabwe, let's go. Adam gets to say no, that's not going to work for me. You didn't plan enough. There's not enough thought that went into it, and he doesn't have to participate. But if it's something that I really want Adam to be a part of, and it's something that I really believe in, and a work project or something like that I really know that we need to do and that we would benefit from, I know that if I just take some time, prepare for the questions Adam's going to ask me so he can feel good about what we're doing, I know it's going to benefit me to do so. And as a consequence, I feel better about myself and I feel better about what we did. And I'm better in a position. And I wouldn't normally slow down in that way. And also, a valuable part for me is Adam doesn't ask me to be more like him. Oftentimes people think if you're an action taker, you're often unprepared. But the truth is, if Adam were left to his own devices, he'd spend way too much time planning in order to get anything done. And if I were left to my own devices, eventually I would be reckless and that would cause some sort of a problem. The fact that we can kind of complement each other in this way is a really helpful thing and allows us to be really, really successful. So think about that in terms of your own overthinking behaviors and habits that you have in relationship to this issue. and just surround yourself with people that will cause you to slow down from a position of care. It'll make a huge difference. Thanks for being here. If you wouldn't mind doing me a super huge favor, I would love it if you would share this podcast with at least one person in your life that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And also, don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you listen to your podcast. And also follow me on all of the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can search for my name, Elliott Connie, or at Elliott Speaks. That's my handle across all platforms. Can't wait to see you tomorrow.